Oh, the places you'll go when you go in Tom's, the beloved family footwear brand that makes shoes for your moments that matter most. Over the years, we've learned a thing or two about style and comfort. Weaving both together, our fall collection includes hundreds of styles for women, men, and kids at great prices. We're talking boots, sneakers, wedges, loafers, flats, and our iconic alpargata slip-ons. You name it, we've got it. Pair our sneakers with your favorite denim, seasonal boots with oversized sweaters, and loafers with boxy blazers. Our signature cloud-bound insoles deliver exceptional cushioning for all-day wear. The best part? When you buy Tom's, you help make a difference in the lives of others. Together, we've positively impacted over 100 million people to date, and we're just getting started. So slip in and step out to Pilates or school drop-off, playgrounds and dance class, perfect for date night or girls' night, apple picking or game day. We are the brand to support the life you lead. Shop the full fall assortment now at toms.com.
RMA is a fertility center where next-level science and proven treatment plans turn big dreams into big reality. Realities like me. Start your fertility journey today. Learn more at rmanetwork.com.
Dial pound 250 and use the keyword fertility for more information. You'll have the option to receive a one-time auto-dial text from iHeartMedia.
Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a returning guest, a very special guest, Austin Picard of the Underclass podcast. And we talked about Operation Mockingbird. We did about 90 minutes, maybe a month ago. And we were done. We barely scratched the surface. Like, we barely even covered all the topics. And I had a bunch on my list to talk about. So I've got some slides. I have a John Stockwell video. We also did a show on the order of the solar temple that was kind of in the French world. And that was very well received. A lot of people didn't know about that story. I knew a little bit about it. I was in this kind of like a cult investigation show back in 2015 or 16 with Christian Page that was on there, that they covered it in detail. But the connections to Grace Kelly and her accident, like one of the most famous actresses of all time, having a car crash that ended up on property of the Solar Temple puts a whole new spin on that. Like, it's unbelievable. Like, and even that car crash, it's like Princess Diana in France too, like, or in the French area. Like, this is like another stage, like not stage drowning, but stage car crash. Like, it's strange. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's another show. Anyway, so we kind of teed up. We were talking in the pre-show about all the stuff that's really Mockingbird. It's really a historical arc from this Mockingbird. I have a bunch of slides too. You'll see this mighty Wurlitzer picture of Dulles. Dulles' name keeps popping up in strange places. So not just JFK, not just MK Ultra, but also, I mean, it all floats over. He's a much more extraordinary figure maybe than the public perceives, certainly as I perceive, but like his hand is in so many of these, I would call them cauldrons, really, not pots. But we're still living with it today. Like, we're still kind of going through that. So we're going to talk more all about that. So Austin Picard of the Underclass podcast, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much, William. I think that what we were just talking about privately is just a perfect place to start, basically, because it's really, the implication is that Mockingbird never ceased to exist. It just was kind of like covertly masked once it was exposed and allegedly ended. But you can kind of point to various researchers who have really pulled that thread and shown the credible evidence that exists to prove that out, because even researchers like Alex Constantine, who I find a lot of his work very valuable. He's an incredible researcher, but basically he, among a few others, is under the impression that Mockingbird was not closed down by the CIA in 1976. And he provided specifically an example of in 1998 when Steve Kangas, I think that's how you pronounce his last name, but he's also an investigative journalist, very valuable. But he was arguing that CIA asset Richard Mellon Scaife ran Forum World Features, a foreign news service used as front to disseminate CIA propaganda around the world. And on the February 8th, 1999, Kangas this journalist, he was found dead in the bathroom of the Pittsburgh offices of Scaife. He had been shot in the head. Officially, he had committed suicide, but some people believe he was murdered, clearly. And so it's very interesting because there was a Salon article in Salon magazine, and basically the police report was really much in question with the autopsy, where they had like the cause of death was entirely different. The gunshot wound was allegedly on the left of his head, according to the police report, but the autopsy, it was on the top roof of his mouth. And so it's just completely strange when it comes to the discrepancies in the autopsy there as well. But it seems like his hard drive for his computer had been erased upon his death. Right. Very coincidental. Yeah. It's just, how many times have we witnessed that story? Yeah, exactly.
The one thing I've learned in this that I would never believe is how corrupt the medical examiners are. I was naive about that. There are a lot of them in these cities are political, or they have, just like the Mockingbird, somebody's behind them making sure certain, conclusions are made in certain situations. When I was in DC from 95 to 98, there were deaths that were like super suspicious that never hit the media. Like we knew, like, okay, this guy fell off of like a 6-story building. It's like, duh, this is another cleanup job, and they never hit the national media. So these are the type of things that happen in this in the U.S. now, in the empire. See if I can pull up that article. I just pulled up the for people who didn't see this, who aren't watching this on Rockfin, Rumble, or X. I just pulled up an article by Alex Constantine. We can go through that because I came across it too in my own research. But here's an article about the death outside of a billionaire's office. Steve Kangas, Kangas 37, former Army intelligence specialist. Wow.
It's absurd, man. Like, to me, it makes a lot of sense that he of course he was attempting to follow that thread down the rabbit hole, and he was discovering too much tangible, credible evidence that just wasn't going to be allowed at this time. And by the way, you just found a 404, right? It's gone. That's just how often, right? It's amazing.
Yeah, consistent.
Man, the Internet Archive just got hacked and went down recently, and that is it's just, people need to be more aware of the fact that there's so much memory holing effectively happening, right? Where we have this dead internet where the archives are being erased, and it's really a sad state of affairs because we're losing historical evidence that proves otherwise, according to these official narratives, and provides real alternative evidence that is much more credible and tangible, and it makes sense that would be the approach, especially in the age of total information awareness and full spectrum dominance and state-sponsored fact checkers, and right. I mean, it just seems like the way of the world in the modern digital age. But I do.
This case is incredible. It's great that you bring this up because this is the Allegheny County. This is Pittsburgh. This is the same thing that overlaps with the Smiley Face Killers. This is Dakota James, totally corrupt. This guy, the guy that was there at this time of Kangas, was from out of the country. I mean, it says right here, pathologist was Shakir, S-H-A-K. That's not a WASP name, by the way. That's somebody from the Middle East or something. It's the same story. The one who did the Dakota James is from China. Like, his name was like Chang or something like that. It's crazy. This is so corrupt. And this is the same kind of Allegheny County. This is like these blue states. I hate to say it, but they're like run by little mob offices. They went after who's the JFK researcher who was the really great forensic pathologist, independent Cyril Wecht. They went after Wecht.
Oh, wow.
On like the charges were almost laughable. Considering the enormity of the corruption in these cities, they went after him for using his like public car to pick somebody up at the airport. It's such a joke. They really prosecuted it on. They put him under, God rest his soul. He passed away, unfortunately. I interviewed him, but they really put him through the ring, almost like one of these like cases against Alex Jones, which just came up. They're trying to take away InfoWars, but like they put him on the back where he had to spend millions of dollars. He couldn't plead guilty because he would have lost his law license. And so they really had him under the gun. It's really corrupt and really disgusting. It makes me sick. And then you see the kind of this case and these smiley face killing cases that they get all wrong. You cannot trust these medical examiners.
No.
It's really sad. And it goes all the way up to Nashville and this whole story about Riley Strain, like
100%. Yes.
Anyway, sorry, it's kind of an aside, but you see it in the larger tapestry that none of these real journalists, they all suck. These like Mockingbird journalists that we're talking about, they're all corrupt and saying the same thing and putting this false curtain, almost like the Wizard of Oz, to the public.
Exactly. It really is. It's the veil of political theater, right? Where it's very much like a distraction from the true, I would say, underlying power structure that I think is much more sophisticated than people can almost conceptualize just in general, right? Because the understanding of the true nature of power is so far from, I think, reality and the truth and how it actually operates that it takes so much time and effort to kind of bridge that gap, right? That it's like, man, you wind up in this upside down moral landscape with embracing ideas, that are only self-defeating, right? And in the grand scheme of things, honestly. And I think last episode I had brought up Edward Bernays, but that was mainly because of the philosophy behind all of this and propaganda as a tool in itself. And I mean, the fact that he's nephew of Sigmund Freud in the first place and considered to be a pioneer in the field of public relations and propaganda, and referred to as the father of public relations. And so it's kind of strange because you have like in this, for example, this like CIA orchestrated overthrow of Guatemala, and you know what I mean, in 1954, and then Arbenz, and you have Operation Condor, which mirrors the Phoenix Project or the Phoenix program in many ways. And people are very unaware of how Condor kind of affected, let's say, the rat line set up post-World War II. And I think that there was a very much covert infrastructure in place where they would have these ex-SS officials just covertly trafficked all over the world into safe havens all over the world, and
verified. Klaus Barbie's a perfect example, like the torture of Tours or somewhere in France, like kicking people downstairs, the most horrible atrocities. Gosh. Ends up in, I think, Ecuador or somewhere around there. It's not funny. Wow. And then he starts like puppeteering right-wing autocrats and Operation Condor. And then he is providing services to Escobar. Like, you can't even believe this. This is a true story. They finally got him, but like, who else did they find down there? They found out one of the guys from the Holocaust and took him to Israel. I forgot his name now. But anyway, yeah, you're right. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. It's really fascinating once you get into it all, right? But I think it's interesting because
it's another show.
It really is. I think that in Bernays' book, in the 1928 book, Propaganda, he explains his perspective by describing the importance of maintaining systematic control over the general public. And he stated that the conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. This is a logical result of the way in which our democratic society is organized. Vast numbers of human beings must cooperate in this manner if they are to live together as a smoothly functioning society. In almost every act of our daily lives, whether in the sphere of politics or business, in our social conduct or our ethical thinking, we are dominated by the relatively small number of persons who understand the mental processes and social patterns of the masses. It is they who pull the wires which control the public mind. And he is absolutely accurate in that statement. I mean, and of all people to be making that statement, I think it's worthwhile in mentioning that, especially in context of Mockingbird, right? Because, I mean, honestly, we consistently witness I would say we consistently witness the Mockingbird media in action, right? And I mean, from Watergate to Pizzagate to the Twitter files, right? Like, right, I mean, how many examples do we need? Mockingbird looming large in the background, of course, and it's really just this state-sponsored influence operation, distorting the minds of the public, and it's all for deception, and so I just think that it's important for us to really grasp that philosophy of deception that has been utilized for generations. This is nothing new. And so I think it's very naive for anyone to be under the impression that, it ran its course. I just think that's ridiculous to think something like that is truly the case, especially when you can point to things like the Telecommunications Act of 1996 with Bill Clinton, let alone, right, the when you can point to, like, what was the other example? The Smith Modernization Act, right?
I have that in the slides, so we can go over that. Yeah.
Yeah. Just another ridiculous example of how they are managing public perception by controlling the media landscape. And so really,
you saw something really remarkable in this election, really 10 days past, not that much, which is an end around against this kind of mass formation that they're able to do. So really at the very end, the winners, Vance and Trump, went on these smaller podcasts, Rogan,
right,
and Theo Vaughn and Dylan, maybe some other ones, and really, like, right at that right proper moment, like 1 or 2 days before the election. Yeah. And it really changed history. Whether they've tried, I think they're going to try to blow Trump and his whole crew away. I think that's the next step. It's not try to blow his head off, but like literally get a truck bomber, because
oh my gosh.
I'm dead serious. I think that they're going to go big because they've already gone big.
Yeah.
So I think that they really can't get him into office in any way because they're all currently engaged in huge criminal acts. But this end around this kind of formation that the media was able to do for decades was really much more important than maybe the public may realize. Yeah.
Yeah, I discovered Teddy Roosevelt. I believe it was Teddy Roosevelt's wife actually was the one. Let me pull that up because it's amazing once you realize what this really spells out. And that is honestly, what you realize is that Edith Kermit Roosevelt, she wrote this article in January of 1962. It was published in the Amarillo Globe Times, and it was titled Edith Kermit Roosevelt, and it was titled "Finds Power Elite, Has Funnel into Capital."
RMA is a fertility center where next-level science and proven treatment plans turn big dreams into big reality. Realities like me. Start your fertility journey today. Learn more at rmanetwork.com.
Dial pound 250 and use the keyword fertility for more information. You'll have the option to receive a one-time auto dial text from iHeartMedia.
Is your dog's food human grade or feed grade?
Well, he's a dog, so feed grade.
Feed grade standards are meant for cattle and livestock that only live a few years. But Just Food for Dogs human grade food is backed by 10 years of research with a long list of health benefits.
Wow, human grade. Can I have some?
Well, you actually could eat it, but this recipe is for Benny.
Oh.
Give us 2 weeks and we'll change your dog's life forever. Get 50% off your first subscription order right now at justfoodfordogs.com. More life, more years, more love.
And it's very interesting because there's an article at the Institute for the Study of Globalization and Covert Politics, and I think that it's something that everyone should really try and go through, because it's such a wonderful investigative deep dive and report on the Pilgrim Society and the Anglo-American establishment. But I think this perspective coming from a first lady, right, of Roosevelt,
Right. Like
her
in the mix,
perspective
right?
on power, yes, is just, it's very much a brief window into the true nature of power, as we were speaking on earlier. And that is, but what I think is interesting is that Joel van der Rijsden is this Dutch journalist who wrote this long form article that I encourage everyone to go and research and read up on, because it also provides a membership list that's very, very detailed as well. And included on that list is Tucker Carlson's father, right? So there's just so much overlap with individuals who have been tied to media and covert influence operations and things of that nature. And like Voice of America is the perfect example, which Tucker's father was really responsible for running as an operation. But anyway, what's very interesting is that this introduction sort of to power is, I think, a great place for us to start with the details of Mockingbird, because it really does outline exactly that power structure. So it says most people have at least vaguely heard of the term Eastern Establishment. This is a reference to a group of people in the northeast of the United States, which to many appears to wield a disproportionate amount of influence over the nation's politics. This influence, which goes back even further than the days of John D. Rockefeller Sr. and J.P. Morgan Sr., has been illustrated by the fact that a great number of individuals working in the senior positions of government have come from a select number of universities, banks, insurance companies, law firms, think tanks, and foundations, only to return to this network after their public term came to an end. Often, these individuals served as political appointees or independent advisors to a number of presidents, with protégés at universities and think tanks continually showing up in later administrations. Together with a number of other peculiarities, think of controversial policies, suspected cover-ups, ignored conflicts of interest, lack of media attention, etc. Some people have become suspicious of what at times appears to be a kind of permanent establishment, controlling the machinations of government, no matter who the public is allowed to vote for. So this is when you get Edith Roosevelt, and this is her words. There is an establishment in the United States. The word establishment is a general term for the power elite in international finance, business, the professions largely from the Northeast, who wield most of the power regardless of who is in the White House. Most people are unaware of the existence of this legitimate mafia. That's the term she put it in.
Wow, that's amazing.
Right? Yet the power of the establishment makes itself felt from the professor who seeks a foundation grant to the candidate for a cabinet post or State Department job. It affects the nation's policies in almost every area. For example, the Council on Foreign Relations in New York City, subsidized by Rockefeller interests since 1927, boasts a membership of at least 90% establishment figures. It's just an amazing thing to actually witness the perspective of a first lady connected to an individual of such prominent power like Teddy Roosevelt. It's just, especially with their dynastic family of powerful influence, of course, right, with FDR and everything else tied in with that. But I think it's interesting once you find out that Mockingbird essentially paved the way for Eisenhower to successfully at least become the president. And then, of course, it's Eisenhower himself who warns us all in his final speech, right, to the public, of course, of the military-industrial complex. And it starts to make a lot of sense when you realize all of the covert operatives that were surrounding Eisenhower.
Right, one named Kermit Roosevelt. Like Kermit Roosevelt is the one managing Operation Ajax to overthrow Mossadegh. 53.
Exactly. There you go. So it's just a perfect example of how power truly functions, I think. But So
And I think it's important. I think it's important you make these statements because these are things going on, Bernays and this statement and the Anglo-American establishment and
Right.
Tragedy and Hope and Quigley that comes in. All these people are involved in shaping the American consciousness through, in part, by Mockingbird, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's not just the press. They call it the press here, but now the media, now it's everywhere. Now it's the subversion of everything. They've moved into they're moving into the podcast space right now. So they've gone to where the independence is, and then they're going to try to manipulate that too. So it's people need to be very careful. A lot of these people who are going to get canned from these dead legacy things are saying they're going to get into podcasting. Don Lemon and Matthews and all these other bums nobody trusts anymore.
Exactly. So, you lose public trust, and then you start a podcast.
Right, and try to get it back. Good luck.
Yeah, exactly. Good luck. I think that there is such a hunger and appetite for truth right now, and at least I think that we're consistently witnessing the awakening process of many people who are just becoming more and more kind of, I would just say, deluded by not just entirely kind of, disillusioned by the political process, right? And I think that is really inevitably forcing and causing many people to just attempt to kind of gauge honesty in general. Are you kind of pursuing, I would say, like, what are the motivations behind, you providing this information to the public? And I think that if you're honest, people are very, they can, at least if they have some sort of framework of morality and, ethical foundation they can rely on, I feel like you're not as easily seduced and deceived. And especially once you've been deceived for so long and you start to become much more skeptical. I really do rely heavily on my ability to kind of, discern for myself whether or not I view the intentions of an individual to be, I would say, like, just coming from a more pure perspective, right? And that's something that I kind of use as a mantra. It's basically like, I hope for my heart to be in the right place and my intentions to be pure, because the things that we speak on are so important and powerful as far as the way that they affect people's lives, the consequences of the individuals who have been involved in some of these cases that we talk about. It's like you really are running a risk if you aren't trying to uphold, the credible, you know what I mean? Like, basically, I'm attempting to show the proper light on the individuals who have been victimized by this system as often as possible. So I don't ever want to disrespect, the plight that they had to endure. And I think that that's something that we should for sure prioritize, because I see so many people in this new media landscape, new age digital landscape, that they seem to be, very much, I would say their inspiration is a grift, right? And so it tends to be that I don't view it, and I'm not trying to judge others in this way. I just think that it's very much important to be pursuing this research with moral intentions, right? They need to be ethical intentions, right? And I think that as long as that's how you're pursuing these investigative threads, then you'll wind up in the right conclusion. And I'm very, very careful on really speaking in certain terms, unless I have evidence to kind of reinforce what I'm saying. And so Joseph Alsop is like one of the key examples for one of the most important journalists under the control of Mockingbird. And guess what? He's a Pilgrim Society member. Wow. And he's prominent key member. And this just consistently is overlapping, reoccurrence, I would say, because the Dulles brothers themselves, I believe their uncle, William Dulles, was also a Pilgrim Society member. I mean, it really
along with them too, both of them.
Yeah, exactly. And but when you get into it, you have this individual that I just mentioned, Joseph Alsop. His articles appeared in over 300 different newspapers. And other journalists, of course, willing to promote the views of the CIA were Stuart Alsop, New York Herald Tribune, Ben Bradley, of course, we talked about last week, who was, he played a key role in not only Watergate, but he also played a key role in, of course, later on with the Confessions of a DC Madam and the Craig Spence, Henry Vincent. Yeah.
He was the
really
editor-in-chief at the Washington Post, right, Bradley?
Yes. Yep. And
let me just interject here, because this is the quote from Constantine right at the beginning, the subversion of the free press by the CIA Mockingbird. This is the quote that is, Graham owns this, Bradley's running it. The quote is, "You could get a journalist cheaper than a good call girl for a couple $100 a month," unquote.
At Just Food for Dogs, we focus on just that, food for dogs. We've spent over a decade focusing on feeding trials and studies to create the freshest dog food available and less on gimmicks. Okay, fine. Here's one dog bark. Give us 2 weeks and we'll change your dog's life forever. Get 50% off your first subscription order right now at justfoodfordogs.com. If your pet didn't clean the bowl on the first order, you'll get a refund. Just Food for Dogs. More life, more years, more love.
Hey, stuff happens to good people every day. So if you're injured in an accident or injured at work, there's only one person you need to call. Fareed, the owner of DTLA Law. Here's what's great about DTLA Law. You can get a free case review right now, and you pay $0 unless you win. And they've collected over $1 billion in settlements for their clients. Call the top injury law firm in LA now. Dial pound 250 and say injury lawyer. You'll have the option for a one-time auto dial text message from this podcast.
Jeez.
On the availability and prices of journalists willing to peddle CIA propaganda and cover stories. Catherine the Great, Deborah Davis. So, anyway,
wow.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think it's important. Like, this is what they're doing. So all these Alsops, and there's stories about these guys going to meet in kind of like we talked in the pre-show about public diplomacy and private diplomacy. Right. So this is almost like a Pilgrim Society, private diplomacy, where they would talk to them, get information from them, and also give them bad information, tell them what to do. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, so it's Alsop, Bradley. Who else is in that group?
Yeah. Let's see. We had Alsop, Bradley. We have C.D. Jackson, of course, right? And, he played a prominent role in sort of like, I would say, the infiltration of Catholicism in many ways, and sort of like just offering just misconceptions and really just diluting the perception of certain, it's really sad to have seen the infiltration of not only newspapers, Hollywood, right, but also an attempted, I would say, an attempted constraint of religious ideology as well, right? So you have these infiltrated operatives who are also attempting to subvert your religious ideology, and for, of course, their own benefit, right? Which you see often, where it sort of religion becomes politicized, and it's by design. It's a tactic, right? And so that's something that's very important, because C.D. Jackson was heavily involved in much of that, as well as Walter Pincus, Washington Post, Walter Winchell, New York Daily Mirror, Drew Pearson, Walter Lippmann. There's so many.
It's
Hal
the who's
Hendricks.
who. It's all the elite, right? It's not a joke.
Yeah. Not at all. I mean, Hal Hendricks, he's one of them as well. And it's interesting because he was with Miami News, and he, in 1963, was known to be a Mockingbird operative, provided the Oswald story just hours after the assassination.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And you see this huge overlap, right?
Absolutely.
You see this huge overlap between these characters and JFK, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And the JFK assassination it's really amazing to witness the fact that it wasn't only JFK's assassination. I mean, they basically, Ronald Reagan was operating out of the Lookout Mountain Laboratory before he was ever president. And so it's very interesting.
The Constantine article has Reagan as a Mockingbird operative in 52, right from the beginning.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing.
From that far. So these guys are all part of the club.
Right.
And Luce and everything. Luce is the people who bought the Zapruder film. So you could do a whole show on the Eastern Establishment, Pilgrim Society, and the JFK assassination, whose dad was a member of the Pilgrim Society.
Yes. It's so crazy. I was watching like old footage, not only of Henry Kissinger giving speeches at the Pilgrim Society, but also, I mean, you can trace it all the way back to, it was in the 1930s. I watched them introduce the president, and also the just leaders from all around the world at this Pilgrim Society event. And it's very interesting. But anyway, this is a
great picture because here's Luce and Jackson together.
Wow.
Right, crazy.
Yeah. Of course. Whitelaw Reid was another one. There's so many of them. But this there's a really great article on Spartacus as well by John Simpkin. And he does a great job on a really deep dive into Mockingbird as well. He's a pretty good source when it comes to this. But it's interesting because the journalists sometimes wrote articles that were commissioned by Frank Wisner or Wisner himself. And so the CIA also provided them with classified information to help them with their work, of course. And so that places them in the forefront when it comes to, you have a story before anybody else. And of course right. And it's just, you kind of naturally rise to the top, whether it's by design or, the influential individuals within the publications themselves, it's just, it seems like it almost happened naturally for a lot of individuals too, just because of the different tips and I would say just valuable information that was otherwise unavailable to anyone else. And there you go.
So you're kind of like made, but not by the Italian mafia. You're made by the Anglo-American establishment.
Exactly.
If you go along with Mockingbird, right? We're going to make your career. You're going to make money. You're probably protected. You get inside information. You think you get inside information. You keep your job, right?
Exactly.
All that stuff. Yeah.
Of course, man. And I think you remember Dr. Leanna Wynn? She always surprised me as far as she stuck out to me in context of some sort of Mockingbird media asset in the modern day.
She pops up in two crises, right? Or two things, right? Yeah.
Because I remember, so when she was making her rounds during COVID and the hysteria and talking about dangling carrots in front of the unvaccinated and things like that, it turns out she had really, kind of...
Hey, stuff happens to good people every day. So if you're injured in an accident or injured at work, there's only one person you need to call. Fareed, the owner of DTLA Law. Here's what's great about DTLA Law. You can get a free case review right now, and you pay $0 unless you win. And they've collected over $1 billion in settlements for their clients. Call the top injury law firm in LA now. Dial pound 250 and say injury lawyer. You'll have the option for a one-time auto dial text message from this podcast.
Bada boom, sold.
Huh?
Just sold my car on Carvana. Dropping it off and getting paid today.
Already?
What, you still haven't sold yours? You told me about it months ago.
Is
the offer good?
Oh, the offer's great.
Don't have another car yet?
I could trade it in for this car I love.
Come on, what are we waiting for?
You're right.
Let's go.
Whether you're looking to sell your car right now or just whenever feels right, go to Carvana.com and sell your car the convenient way. Terms and conditions apply.
She had popped up and surfaced in one other massive crisis, and this was the Boston Marathon bombing. And I remember immediately once I saw her, I went back and I found the footage of her talking to, I think it was Anderson Cooper. I'm trying to remember. It might have been, one of the, damn it, what's the name of the New York City governor?
Which one was it?
The one with the brother.
Cuomo. Cuomo.
Yeah, thank you. I totally just forgot his name right now, but yeah, it's ridiculous because I think she was either talking to Cooper or Cuomo in that footage of the Boston Marathon bombing. But she's providing this ridiculous kind of Hollywood, just staged narrative that's very much kind of emotionally provocative, but it feels scripted, right? Especially going back and watching it again. And so you watch it and she's talking about how all these bodies are coming into the morgue, and she dramatizes or coming into, the emergency unit that she was allegedly working at as a doctor. But the story she tells is that she hadn't gotten a call from her husband yet. And so she's adding this dramatic perspective of each person who came in on a stretcher she imagined to be her husband, until finally he called her. And yeah, it was a little too long of a segment as well. It seemed like it was created for dramatic purposes, but this is how they function often. And so I just find it interesting that she is someone that I like to point out, because it's just another example of how these little media operatives pop up in different events where they need to provide this sort of official narrative to the public. And that is very much in line with Mockingbird and the tactics behind Operation Mockingbird. But in 1953, that's when the network was essentially overseen by Dulles, right? Alan Dulles. And so by this time, you had Mockingbird as basically having major influence over 25 newspapers and wire agencies. And that was in 1953. So these organizations
early, right away, as MK Ultra starts, right? The official date of MK Ultra.
Of course. And guess who these organizations were run by? Pilgrim Society members and people such as William Paley, who ran CBS, Henry Luce, like you just mentioned, Time
Nelson
Magazine.
Rockefeller's around there. Yep. He's actually the intro before MK Ultra. It was this guy, Nelson Rockefeller, who's also overlapped with C.D. Jackson and all these other people. So he's networked with all this stuff. Right. That's why I'm showing all these pictures of him.
The OPC, right, the Office of Policy Coordination, that Wisner was really running Mockingbird through. It was funded by siphoning off funds intended for the Marshall Plan. So some of this money was, of course, used to bribe journalists and publishers. And Wisner was constantly looking for ways to help convince the public of the dangers of communism at the time. So this is kind of when you get the 1954 Wisner arranging this funding for this Hollywood production of Animal Farm. And so again, it's the animated allegory based on the Orwell book, of course. And Constantine himself, by the way, said that in the 1950s, some 3,000 salaried and contract CIA employees were eventually engaged in propaganda efforts. And Wisner was also able to restrict newspapers from reporting about certain events. For example, the CIA plots to overthrow Iran and Guatemala. And so Henry Luce, owner of this large media empire, and becomes a key figure in Mockingbird. And David Halberstam has pointed out in The Powers That Be in 1979 that Luce's politics hardened in the post-war years, and Time had become increasingly Republican in its tone. He had been stunned by Truman's defeat of Dewey in 1948. Then in the fall of 1949, China had fallen. The Democratic administration had failed to save Chiang, and that was too much. Apparently, by the way, you have Mao and this kind of, Chinese Marxist form of communism. It was really very much, I would say, it was a manufactured ideology, just the same as, right, as we were talking privately about ideological subversion and sort of Bolshevism, Nazism, Zionism being utilized as a tool of deception and really diversion and also to, I think, kind of the point being that they want to divide us in every way possible and use it, of course, in a strategy to conquer our minds, I think, more than anything. But that's why I think ideology has been a tool from the beginning in more ways than one. And that we can really kind of play that out when it comes to the fact that you have, like, I had mentioned David Livingstone privately as well. And it's very interesting because he kind of puts it in the terms of, it was really more than just, they had created this Bolshevist revolution at the time, right? After post World War I, and it's really amazing once you find out what was happening in the Bolshevik Revolution, because it was all devised strategy to conquer the Russian Empire at the time, really. And I think that once you know about Rasputin and these various, he seems like an operative to me, but also some sort of mind control hypnotist.
At that time, yeah.
Right?
He's
Yeah. It's amazing.
When he died, the bullet that was used, the caliber of bullet came from an English gun. So somehow this English stuff. And Crowley was there in 1905 for like the earlier revolution. So this whole kind of like perfidious Albion, the English American establishment, is operating through, and the Germans too. Like the famous train of Lenin going to Stalingrad was full of gold from Germany. So the outside influences were, and they're all Schiff, who was part of the Pilgrim Society, had a personal enmity against the Romanovs because of all the pogroms, the anti-Jewish pogroms that were taking place. So there was a very strong ethnic element to it of like Jews and Gentile fighting. Like there's a lot of really dark stuff going on there. Yeah.
No doubt. And when you have Aleister Crowley's friend and Kuhnlo banker Otto Kahn, who, by the way, according to Norman Thwaites, this guy was wholeheartedly pro-Allied and especially pro-British, right? So that's like in the terms of the rapprochement, the Great Rapprochement and everything, because I think I really was questioning how independent the original colonies were from the crown to begin with, because I read that it was put in terms of almost the founding of the original colonies was a Rosicrucian mission. And it really terrified me when I was reading about this as well, because essentially it seems like, from the foundation of right, I would say accepted recorded history, we have been misled and deceived into believing some sort of false narrative in context of the foundation of these various nations, right? And I really do think that it might be a different story where secret fraternal organizations of powerful influence had a very prominent role, and perhaps it was, I think that is almost kind of proven out in the War of 1812, which was really a banker's war, and we inevitably began consistently paying a tax back to the crown ever since, basically. I mean, it never really ceased, and I think people are unaware of that, as well as the fact that, of course, the creature from Jekyll Island and the Federal Reserve and everything else when it comes to, right, just I would say,
we're paying these fake taxes. They're not overt taxes, but the Federal Reserve is a tax on the people. It's just a more sophisticated one, and all rife with Pilgrim Society people, Schiff, just like I mentioned. It's all of them. J.P. Morgan. Which one isn't? I mean, God only knows what all these overlapping clubs, because Luce himself is probably, I think he's a Pilgrim Member Society and Skull and Bones.
Oh my God.
So like they're hanging out at the freaking tomb, in a literal, birth and rebirth thing. All these guys, Buckley and all these characters trace back there. This Yale nexus. Yeah, it's really crazy. So we don't know what other secret societies, and a lot of the stuff that happened in the French Revolution, which really is a foundational, like a important dropping off point for communism and really the radical left everywhere, because they beheaded the king, right? Yeah. There's like the knowledge that the illuminated ideas are in there, like through the Masons. So and the people, and we kind of look at the Illuminati through a lens of a secret society that decayed and dissipated and is gone. But at that time, like the studies, the Illuminati is an important part of the Western intellectual tradition and the Enlightenment. And I think they're starting to realize that. Like there's actual, like a lot of people pushing for this kind of change and these ideas that came out of Ingolstadt and Weishaupt.
This is the story of the one who, as a maintenance specialist for a historic high-rise, knows that vintage charm historically needs constant attention. Which is why when it's time to upgrade turn-of-the-century mechanicals, they turn to Grainger. With easy access to 1 million-plus products and the scale to deliver when and where you need them. The right tools and supplies are never far away. So the one can keep that vintage building running like new. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Wow, yeah, I completely agree. But this individual that I had just mentioned,
acknowledged by George Washington, the founder of this country,
right?
So, sorry.
Oh yeah, no, it's much more of a legitimate. People would like to cast doubt on any sort of revisionist narrative, and I think that honestly, truth lies within the revisionist narratives, right? And I think that it's absolutely ridiculous to use it as this kind of tool to dismiss and discredit individuals who are willing to question, right, the official recorded history of these events and things of that nature. But I do think that to your point of the French Revolution and it really being like, I think the intentions behind it are much different than what the average individual is led to believe. And I think that when it comes to like the Comte de Saint-Hilaire, who was the French ambassador to London from 1920 to 24, and he wrote this book called Geneva versus Peace in 1937. And in it, he recalls this dinner conversation with Otto Kahn, who I just mentioned, this Kuhnloeb banker and Aleister Crowley's friend, and also not only Aleister Crowley, a friend of Crowley, but also a partner of Jacob Schiff and Paul and Felix Warburg and Kuhnloeb and company. So, who detailed the nature of the dialectical process of pitting two apparent opponents against each other by backing the Russian Revolution while also advancing the cause of global capitalism. And so Otto Kahn, this partner of Jacob Schiff, he specifically says, you say that Marxism is the very antithesis of capitalism, which is equally sacred to us. It is precisely for this reason that they are direct opposites to one another, that they put into our hands the two poles of this planet and allow us to be its axis. These two contraries, like Bolshevism and ourselves, find their identity in the international. These opposites, which are at the antipodes to one another in society and in their doctrines, meet again in the identity of their purpose and end, the remaking of the world from above by the control of riches, and from below by revolution. Our mission consists in promulgating the new law and in creating a God, that is to say, in purifying the idea of God and realizing it when the time shall come. We shall purify the idea by identifying it with the nation of Israel, which has become its own Messiah. The advent of it will be facilitated by the final triumph of Israel, which has become its own Messiah. It
feels like that's what's going on today. It's not God. It's Israel is the God. The state is the God. I am the state. It's almost like something from Louis XIV, right? I'm the state.
Amazing.
So the state is the God they worship. It's not that there's an external God.
Exactly.
It's crazy. Things are so freaking crazy right now.
Just mind-boggling.
It's like biblical. Yeah, it blows your mind. This Hegseth guy they're putting in Secretary of Defense is like,
right?
He's literally like a Templar. Like he has the Templar crosses that goes through the Pilgrim Society, right? The House of the Temple, and goes back to the the sacred place where Christ died or was born or whatever.
Right.
And he's like a freaking crusader, like a literal crusader for the temple. So is it the temple or is it God?
Exactly.
So are you talking about something of brick and mortar,
right,
or something beyond that?
I think that's something that, like, I've realized that people tend to misinterpret what others are truly saying and what the meaning behind which God are they referring to when they say God. right? And I think that we have to ask that question before we fall into the deceptive trap of they said God, so we identify it as the God we believe in, or whichever, God that at the very least, what I mean, just your version and interpretation of God is what most people kind of rely on when they hear it. So it triggers that in their mind, and they don't tend to ask the question, is this a different God that they're referencing, right? And that and I think that people are very unaware of the fact that we have these ancient pagan religions that are very much still in vogue. They're just covertly being practiced and not at all, right? I would say in no way is this above board. It's all being clandestinely, like it's the hidden knowledge. It's the Illuminati, right? Is the secret societies control and protect the secret knowledge. And that's what it truly seems to be is the case. And so the hidden history is, I'm sure, archived within some sort of secret society fraternal organization, has the hidden history of
question.
the world.
Don't you think that these guys, I mean, they supposedly inside the Skull and Bones, they have the Illuminati dictum, right? The axiom or whatever it is. But don't you think they know the real history? They all are the insiders. And it goes back to our other talk about the werewolf, right? That's how they control. They know the real history. We don't.
Exactly.
We can't figure out who the werewolf is, but I can tell you right now, whoever's listening, it's the Skull and Bones type people are the werewolves with the inside knowledge about shaping public opinion and MK Ultra and whatever it means to be like. That's just a starting point. That's the first step in 1,000 steps. Like, you don't know if you have 149 sub projects doing all kinds of stuff. It's literally a Manhattan Project. All these same characters are involved. Nelson Rockefeller knew what the heck was going on. Dulles, I mean, incredible stuff.
It is incredible, especially when I was just doing this recent episode, and like I said, I had kind of traced this connection to the funding of and financing of Hitler in 1933, and then also it kind of simultaneously is what was occurring in America at the time was the business plot and Smedley Butler going public and this monumental claim with these allegations of these elite individuals attempting to perform a military coup d'etat and really install a more fascist puppet was essentially the goal, I think, and because the timing of it seems very strange, right? Just that in itself is something worth noting. But I also think that when you realize the fact that the Dulles brothers had this interesting connection to, because I found this amazing article from 1944. It was written by Drew Pearson, this journalist, and that it was an editorial published in the Anniston Star in September of 44. And according to that article, even up until 1930, John Foster Dulles, Pilgrim's member, continued optimistic about American investments in Germany. John Dulles made the statement in March 1939 that these dynamic peoples, Germans, Italians, and Japanese, determined to mold their states into a form which would permit them to take their destiny into their own hands and to attain that enlarged status, which under a liberal and peaceful form of government had been denied them. Dulles went on to explain and condone the effort of the dictator nations to enlarge their status, adding that only hysteria entertains the idea that Germany, Italy, or Japan contemplates war upon us. This, no doubt, was the Dulles speaking, who instinctively adopted the banker attitude of the Chamberlains and the Cliveden set. That some way must be found to safeguard investments in Germany. Undoubtedly, this also was the attitude of one important client of Dulles' law firm, the Rockefeller and Pilgrims-linked J. Henry Schroeder Banking Corporation. So it's just ridiculous to me when you get into the details of this. But so Dulles' brother and law partner, Alan Dulles, director, he just so happened to be the director of both J. Henry Schroeder and the Schroeder Trust Company, and the affairs of this company, of course, basically the affairs of this international banking house were entirely tied in with the Dulles law firm. So whether the Dulles brothers knew it or not, it was a member of this banking house, particularly Baron von Schroeder, who financed Hitler. So this was on January 4th, 1933, when Hitler had made desperate efforts to get into power but had not succeeded. So it looked as if he might not succeed at all at this point, according to some. And then suddenly, through Franz von Papen, or Papen, I think is how you pronounce it, now retired as Nazi ambassador to Turkey. Remember, this in 1944, according to Drew Pearson. Hitler met banker Baron von Schroeder. Almost every recent historian agrees on this incident. As told by Rudolf Olden in Hitler, there was no improvement in the financial situation of the party. Symptoms of decline were multiplying and party ties were loosening. Goebbels, in his diary, speaks of rats abandoning the sinking ship. Once again, Hitler had got to the suicide stage. Then came salvation. Money suddenly reappeared. It was von Papen who opened it to Hitler again. With the greatest secrecy, Hitler and Papen met at Cologne at the house of von Schroeder, a banker who enjoyed the confidence of the steel and coal magnates. Goebbels' diary records triumphantly, "If this coup succeeds, then power is not so very remote." During the same time, 1934, that's when the colossal claim reached the American news media. There had been a plot to overthrow President Franklin Roosevelt in favor of a fascist dictatorship. So, allegedly being planned since, of course, 1933, these claims came from Smedley Butler. And, of course, he's one of the most decorated war heroes of his time and wrote War is a Racket, which is phenomenal and really does question and I think provide a perfect view and I would say just the best window into understanding how these international conflicts, military conflicts, whether they're proxy wars or, direct involvement, they're just entirely designed for profit, right? And also for special interests, elite special interest groups to just consistently gain more and more power, more of a threshold for hegemony. These things consistently occur, and it's just a product of the war state and something that we've been, really just living under the consequences of that very same military industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about after Mockingbird media operatives got him into the White House, so it's right. Just once
it's like these are systematized things. Mockingbird and MK Ultra are things that have happening before. They just created like a newer program, but it was always there. And you have to see Butler as like the first Confessions of an Economic Hitman. He was really before that book. So this stuff all goes way back before certain centuries. You have to just admit that. And Butler was one of them. I think he was involved in the overthrow of Haiti.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe Cuba. He was involved in all this. That's how he got decorated, is being involved in these kind of colonial wars.
Exactly. And like I said before, I think it was privately I had mentioned the fact that Church in the 70s, Frank Church discovered that the budget for Mockingbird globally, including film projects, not just television and film and news publications but it's this global network of really a global influence operation that was occurring under Mockingbird. And once you realize that this is in the 70s, that their budget was $265 million of taxpayer money, that's absurd, right? I mean, the level of control that you could potentially achieve under this operation, I think is probably something we couldn't even comprehend, to be honest, right? And we're doing our best. But I pulled up something interesting that I thought you would enjoy, because there's this interview that I listened to from the Covert Action Information Bulletin, which was just a bunch of these individual journalists who had found, they were CIA officers, right, turned agency critics essentially what had happened, but they had become journalists and created this magazine, and they were allegedly attempting to rein in the unbridled right operations of the CIA at the time. And so they're trying to provide the public, at least this is the narrative behind it, and they seem to be, at the very least, they were not pulling punches. They did seem to be like, I would say their intention was just to make sure the American public was aware of the level of corruption involved with the intelligence community, and how much they were truly flexing their global influence with, like you mentioned, the colonial regime change operations. And it's just, I mean, how many different countries, right, have they installed their own puppet regimes? Yeah, it's
that we know of, right? Because like the really skilled operation is there's no force. It's just they install their own person, right? So that's like that's how potent. Like, imagine that at a global scale. Like,
it's amazing.
Incredible.
Man.
It's like some of these they have to like get rid of Allende through force, but like, what about the other ones where they just like, the ballots came out with you as the winner? Sorry,
exactly. It's so ridiculous.
I only have 10 minutes left. Like, we're gonna have to do a part 3. We could probably do a 10-part series. I'm not kidding. I haven't even touched all the stuff we researched. Like, I was researching for this show. There's so many things we haven't even talked about. Like Ford Meyer, his influence operation. He was a globalist. Like, there's books about his globalist ties, and Wisner and all these other characters. Yeah. Tracy Barnes, who made sure that Animal Farm got made in 1954. As part of a propaganda. So like this stuff pops up in the culture, like, oh, George Orwell, great. No, the CIA wants you to listen to this, you know.
Oh yeah.
And you can still see that cartoonized version that is CIA finance 54. Mockingbird.
My gosh, man.
Crazy.
That is so ridiculous. And
we did Stockwell. We could do a whole show on Stockwell because like his like admissions and everything, he just casually admits everything. Like, yeah, we go in, we finance both sides, we overthrow them. Blah, blah, blah.
It's so crazy.
This guy, the funny thing is, like, the CIA dissidents, he doesn't get included in there like Marchetti and some guy who started covert action. Last name starts with an A. A G.
Yeah. Yep.
But that's Stockwell just like, if there's something about him, he got a pass, but he's just blatantly just like to open up the curtain. Yeah, this is how we did it. Yeah, we just go in, blow people away. Whatever.
Oh yeah.
He was in Africa. This is one of the African guys.
Wow.
He's like, so you couldn't like put this 60s. It's almost like somebody from costumes or whatever in a movie put together some guy with this.
It really does look like that.
This outfit with the mutton chops and stuff. Anyway, there's a lot. We'll have to do another show in December, but
I agree, man.
It's probably a good time just to wrap. Or do you want anything you want to say? But I mean, I probably have 10 more minutes. But I mean,
okay. I mean, honestly, we could. It's probably a good spot to wrap up. But a great example of just the last thing I would mention is really just the overall control that they had achieved. Like I think it's interesting the fact that basically another major story that was uncovered was the whole range of CIA media operations throughout the entire world. So this was not only a domestic, influence deception operation for deceiving public, just the public consciousness. I mean, it was clearly geared toward a global network of influence. And I think that should be understood more, because it's something that I think most people are under the impression that it was really just this sort of domestic influence operation, but it was massive in its scope. And so there was an analysis done by this Counter Spy magazine, right? And it's very interesting because apparently this Covert Action Information Bulletin, which was the magazine founded by a former CIA officer turned agency critic, you just mentioned Philip Agee or Aggie. I can't. Yeah,
I think it's
not
Agee,
entirely sure. Okay,
I do know he had to go to Cuba, but I think he started the Counter, whatever it is, that magazine that became an online magazine.
Exactly, that is exactly what he did. And I listened to him and a few other ex-CIA officers who were working with this magazine in an interview format, and it was very interesting because they kind of provided a lot of context to this. And not only Philip Agee, but William Shop James and Elsie Wilcott, Ellen Ray, William Kunstler, Michael Ratner, and Lou Wolfe in 1978. These were the individuals who all founded that Covert Action Information Bulletin. And so it was created in order to allegedly carry on the work of the preceding publication Counter Spy magazine, which the editors claimed had been shut down as a result of CIA harassment. So co-editor Lewis Wolfe joined a panel discussing their investigation into illegal CIA covert operations, where they address a few of the most notable projects, including the CIA's covert media operations. And so in this interview, they really kind of grapple with this range of CIA media operations globally and claim to have done an analysis of the operations and the use of money. Large-scale money is thought between 1/3 and 40% of the CIA's budget. And they said, I should say that the budget figure is the biggest secret that there is in Washington today. At that time, it was estimated that the 1978 budget was in the range of $1.5 billion. A more recent estimate by a military journal, not a liberal journal by any means, estimated that the CIA's budget today is in the range of $10 billion. At any rate, this analysis that we made of the CIA's media operations disclosed, among other things, that they deliver through CIA couriers ready to print or ready to broadcast news, and put that in inverted commas because which is used by the media and that is created by the CIA. And so the interviewer asks, how often does the CIA manipulate the media in this way? Plant stories, get their views in the media. Is this fairly common as a modus operandi for the CIA? In the course of the past 30 years, it goes beyond your wildest imagination. The extent to which the CIA has gone to manipulate public opinion. If you include the MH Chaos program, which was $1 billion program of setting up proprietary companies, setting up student organizations so they could draw radical students in and do every kind of duplicitous manipulation of national student movements, press, propaganda, labor, extensive formation of labor unions, funding of major labor unions, with the objective essentially of manipulating the mind and attitudes of workers throughout the nation and the world. This was the essential tool that they used to destabilize Chile and overthrow Allende. It was, of course, making the economy scream. Confessions of an Economic Hitman, right? Making the economy scream, getting to the military officers. But it was essentially the truckers' union that finally brought the country down and justified Pinochet's takeover of power. 5,000 university professors they've co-opted. That's church committee revelations.
Incredible. The size, the vastness is off the charts.
Yes.
It's like incredible. Like people think, oh, they got a couple guys here and there. They got everybody. It's crazy. That's why they say that was like the kind of a bloodless revolution. Like very few people died in comparison to maybe other revolutions because they had so much infiltration. That's the original 9/11. 9/11, 1973.
It's amazing, and especially in context with Colonia Dignidad and what they used that for, because there's the basically Orlando Letelier was assassinated due to a lot of this as well. It's kind of interesting. He was a Chilean exile who was brutally assassinated in Washington, D.C. in September 1976. And few investigators of the crime gave a thought to Hitler's SS at the time, but it is 100% a factor involved because of what was the operations being ran out of Colonia Dignidad are really astonishing. And what they discovered when that place was raided, and it's really just kind of startling, right? Because they discovered so many different things, basically like. They had, I believe, advanced weaponry, right? They had a JFK file that allegedly had, if I recall, it had incriminating evidence within it that had some implications, some very extraordinary implications in context to the JFK assassination. And they had an archive of the JFK assassination at Colonia Dignidad when it was found. There were all these bunkers and underground tunnels at Colonia Dignidad. And Paul Schaefer himself, who was the ex-SS officer, he was the one who founded Colonia Dignidad, and he was a pedophile, and he was also very much in the same William Branham network as the Jim Jones cult sort of mentality. Yeah, it's very strange because it seems like this was a covert intelligence operation, and that's why you have. Right.
It has all the hallmarks, not the Russian
truly
and disinfo, but there's intelligence all over the place. That's what's really scary. And somebody mentioned in this, it's Johnny, like who else are all these guys? Is Cooper a Mockingbird asset? They may not call it Mockingbird,
right.
But these guys are involved in all kinds of. There's so many influence operatives out there, and they're moving into the alternate media. So people, this show is like, this isn't some kind of historical archive with a bunch of dust on it. This is what's happening. We haven't even got into Mont. Like, we barely scratched the surface again. Like, there's so much information again. We've done 2 episodes, I know, 2.5 hours, and it's just like,
it's absurd because
it's crazy. Let's wrap it up. I got to get ready for the next show. People can see Underclass Podcast. I'll put a link to it. The most recent one is Pilgrim Society. You've done one on Dutro.
Yeah, we should, by the way, have Sam Tripoli, I think, is coming on Monday. So I'm very excited to have a conversation with him. Let's see. Yeah, Monday.
On the Underclass?
On Already Dead.
Okay.
Jose and I are going to have him on for an interview.
About any particular subject?
Well, really, I just hit him up on his birthday, basically, because it was close to the time that he had done Rogan, and I was just telling him happy birthday and like, you're doing great, buddy. But also I had asked him a while back if he would come on the show because really after because we had XG on and we've had a bunch of people on him, but basically we've become almost disciples of Tripoli after he had us on Tinfoil Hat, which he kind of gave me my start, which I very much
a huge show,
admire and respect him for.
Show,
yeah, his willingness to have open-minded conversations alone. I think it's such a valuable thing. And
he was on Rogan right before Trump. Like, what a great book!
Funniest thing of all time.
What a great birthday present!
True,
from Rogan, really. I mean,
I know, cool. Right? It's great. So hopefully that all works out, and it should be at 7:00 on Monday.
I'll put a link to that. Send me that link. I'll put it in the show notes. I'll put it out on social media again. But this is Operation Mockingbird, like an intro class. Like, wow, there's so much information here. We haven't even talked about the modern stuff. But it's with Austin Wade Picard of the Underclass Podcast. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, William.
Yeah, I got a hard stop. Sorry, guys. I got to run. Hold on. Stay there.